All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Picture this. Right now, somewhere in the world, a woman is standing in a pair of stilettos, and her feet are absolutely killing her. She's probably thinking about who decided this was a good idea, right? Blaming some modern fashion designer, a magazine, or some impossible beauty standard cooked up just to make women suffer. But actually, she's wrong about all of it. Because the high heel, it was never designed for her.
So who really invented the high heel? The mind-blowing truth is that the original customer was a man, specifically a 10th century male soldier. We're talking about a Persian cavalry archer holding a bow, riding a war horse into battle around the year 900. If you had told anyone back then that this piece of military equipment would become the universal symbol of femininity, they would have thought you were crazy.
Now you might be thinking, didn't ancient people have raised shoes? Well, early civilizations did have elevated shoes, but they were completely different from a modern heel. Over on the left, we've got practical platforms. Around 3500 BC, Egyptian butchers wore these raised platform sandals just to keep their feet off the blood and offal on the slaughterhouse floor. Later on, in medieval Europe, people strapped on these wooden blocks called pattens to avoid stepping in the mud and garbage of open city sewers. It was basically the ancient equivalent of wearing rubber galoshes. But on the right, that is the true engineered high heel from 10th century Persia. And let me tell you, this was not about avoiding mud. Here is the crucial point, why they actually needed it. The Persian cavalry were some of the most feared military forces in the world, and their shoes were a massive part of that success. Think about it. When you're riding a horse at a full gallop and trying to shoot a bow, a flat shoe just slides right through the stirrup. But a shoe with a raised heel, it catches that stirrup. It locks your foot securely into place. This gave them the leverage to literally stand up in the saddle, aim, and fire while moving at high speeds. The heel gave them stability, which gave them accuracy, which gave them victory. For centuries, this was purely masculine, heavy-duty cavalry gear.
Section 1. Louis XIV and status flexes.
So this whole European obsession kicked off around the year 1599. That's when of Persia sent diplomats to Europe looking for allies against the Ottoman Empire. These diplomats showed up in European courts wearing their traditional heeled riding boots. And man, the European aristocrats absolutely lost their minds. Persian culture was highly prestigious at the time, and suddenly these exotic heeled boots sparked a massive craze among the wealthiest men on the continent. But here's the catch. These European noblemen weren't wearing them to ride horses into combat. They wore them to project status. A shoe that makes it harder to walk, harder to do manual labor, and harder to navigate muddy cobblestone streets. If you could afford to wear a shoe like that, it meant you didn't have to work. You had servants, you had carriages, and you never had to touch the dirt like a commoner. The total impracticality of the shoe was the entire point.
It became such a huge deal that European authorities actually stepped in to control this new status symbol. They literally passed laws regulating heel height based entirely on your social rank. As you can see, you got a ½ inch for commoners, scaling all the way up to 2.5 inches for princes. Your heel height effectively became your social security number, stamped right on the bottom of your shoe for the whole world to see. And nobody, absolutely nobody, took this further than King Louis XIV of France. Louis was about 5'4" tall, which, by the way, was short even by 17th century standards. So to visually dominate every single room he walked into, he wore towering 5-inch heels, usually paired with these massive. It was the ultimate display of masculine power. At the court of Versailles, more height literally meant more power, and men were fiercely competing for inches. In fact, Louis's brother reportedly wore heels reaching up to 8 inches high. I mean, no way, right? Now, Louis XIV was a total political genius, and he weaponized fashion for social control. In 1673, he passed a sumptuary law stating that only members of his court who had his absolute personal favor could wear heels painted with a very specific red dye. And this wasn't just any dye. It was an incredibly expensive red made from crushed Mexican cochineal insects. The color itself was an astronomical financial flex. If you fell out of favor with the king, your heels changed color, and you were forced to advertise your own humiliation right there on your feet. This status symbol was so potent that even William of Orange, a guy who was actively at war with France at the time, started wearing red heels. The man was literally fighting the French king on the battlefield, yet he still copied his shoes. Why? Because the status those red heels was just that irresistible. Even your sworn enemies wanted in on the flex.
Section 2. The Great Gender Shift.
So how did this ultimate symbol of masculinity become feminine? Well, in the 1630s, European upper-class women started wearing heels for the first time. But they didn't do it to look feminine. They did it to intentionally project masculine power.
Alongside the heels, these women were cutting their hair short and smoking recreationally, actively borrowing from men's fashion to elevate their own standing. Of course, once women started wearing the exact same shoes, men felt the immediate need to differentiate. Men's heels suddenly got wider, blockier, and much sturdier. Women's heels got thinner, more tapered, and way more difficult to walk in. It wasn't about comfort at all, it was purely a design choice to ensure everyone could still instantly visually tell the difference between men and women. Then, fast forward to the Enlightenment in the 1700s, which completely changed the philosophy of fashion forever. Enlightenment thinkers emphasized reason and practicality. They argued that men should embody rationality, while they categorized women as inherently emotional and irrational. So, elaborate decorative fashion that prioritized appearance over function, that immediately got tossed into the rational bucket. Men who wanted to be taken seriously as rational thinkers completely abandoned heels for flat, practical shoes. Suddenly, the higher your heels, the less serious you looked. Elizabeth Summelhack at the Bada Shoe Museum perfectly sums it up. She says, "Heels became suspect for men as Enlightenment concepts of male rationality suggested that irrational things like high heels were better left to women. By 1740, the flip was complete. A shoe that had been inherently masculine for centuries became entirely feminine in the span of just a single generation. And it wasn't because the shoe changed, but because the philosophy around it did." The final blow really came with the French Revolution in 1789. Suddenly, aristocratic red heels weren't just unfashionable, they were physically dangerous to wear. They were literal evidence of aristocratic excess. During the Reign of Terror, a pamphlet attacking Marie Antoinette was even titled Portfolio d'un Talon Rouge, the wallet of a red heel. To survive, European men's fashion took a sharp turn toward the practical, dark, minimal look, which actually gave birth to the modern men's suit that guys still wear today. Section 3. Cowboys and the Stiletto. Because while European gentlemen were putting on their flat, sensible shoes to avoid the guillotine, a beautiful irony was happening simultaneously out on the American frontier. Compare our 10th century Persian cavalry to the hypermasculine 19th century American cowboy. Some of the absolute toughest men on the continent were walking around wearing boots with a 2-inch Cuban heel. And why? For the exact same functional reason the Persians invented them 1,000 years earlier, to catch the stirrup and keep the foot locked in while riding. And you can bet nobody dared tell an American cowboy shoe. Meanwhile, back in Europe, the heel was undergoing its final transformation. In the mid-19th century, pornographers began posing female nudes in high heels. This completely erased the shoe's history of male power, permanently recoding the altered posture, the elongated leg, and the arched foot entirely as an erotic female sexual signal. Now, there was a brief disruption in the 1970s when guys started wearing platforms and 3-inch heels, which, if we're speaking historically, was really just a return to the Louis XIV norm. But by the 1980s, the mainstream message was locked in. Flat shoes for men, heeled shoes for women. End of discussion. And the ultimate expression of this female era of the heel arrived in the 1950s. The invention of the stiletto. Get this, the name literally translates to small dagger in Italian. It was intensely engineered with a heavy-duty steel rod hidden inside just to provide structural support. Without that steel core, these impossibly thin, weapon-like heels would just snap like twigs under a person's weight. Which brings us to a wonderfully ironic quote attributed to Marilyn Monroe. She supposedly said, "I don't know who invented the high heel, but all women owe him a lot." It perfectly captures the sentiment of the 1950s, proving that the whole world had completely and totally forgotten the heel's military origins. The incredibly long journey from tactical Persian cavalry equipment to Hollywood's sex symbol was officially complete.
Section 4. The red sole comes back.
It has a funny way of repeating itself, doesn't it? Let's bring this explainer full circle to the 1990s. French designer Christian Louboutin started painting the bottoms of his women's shoes red, creating one of the most recognizable luxury signals in all of modern fashion. Now, while Louboutin says his inspiration came from a bottle of red nail polish, it's an undeniable historical echo. Think about it. Red on the bottom of a shoe signaling immense wealth, status, and belonging to a highly exclusive club. That is King Louis XIV's exact invention. 320 years later, it's the exact same psychological flex about having money and avoiding the mud. It's just applied to a completely different... So what's the big takeaway from all of this? It's actually pretty profound. Objects do not have a gender. A shoe is just a shoe. It was a cavalry tool, then a masculine power symbol, a political weapon, an irrational indulgence, an erotic signal, and finally a modern luxury brand. Through all of that time, the high heel itself hardly changed. Society just arbitrarily reassigned its gender and meaning based on shifting cultural beliefs. It really makes you wonder, as we look at our own modern rules of fashion and identity, what other unbreakable rules are we living by today that are really just